Hi, guys. We are back with David Fantle and Tom Johnson, the writers of Hollywood Heyday. This is such a great book filled with dynamite interviews with the Golden Age legends like Charlton Heston and Bob Hope and Lucille Ball. Let's talk about Charlton Heston. I mean, this guy is bigger than life. And you guys, you got an interview with him. How'd you do that?
Well, actually, we had two visits. And in Hollywood Heyday, a lot of the interviews weren't one and done. We actually build relationships with several of them. Many interviews with George Burns, a couple visits with Gene Kelly. And in the case of Charlton Heston, we had two home visits. One was when we were at the University of Minnesota as college journalists, and one about 12 to 15 years after. And, you know, again, Heston was totally old school. He's a Midwest guy like Tom and I. He went to high school in near Chicago, and went to Northwestern University. Met his wife Lydia at Northwestern University, and they were married for like 60 years.
Wow!
But what Heston lived in this beautiful compound that was up on Coldwater Canyon, and both visits we would come to the main house. Heston himself would answer the door, and then both times Charlton Heston would take us and escort us to a bungalow that was adjacent to his tennis court and swimming pool. And of course, we always joke, and when we do presentations, it sort of sometimes gets a semi-laugh. We thought for one moment that Heston would be able to part his swimming pool when we were walking back there, but it didn't. I guess the Ten Commandments humor doesn't always play, but anyways.
He lived on a mountaintop though, up on Mulholland. So
yeah,
but maybe at least bring out the Ten Commandments.
Really.
And actually, the interviews, he was in a chair. It was a biblical Ten Commandments director's chair, and his Moses staff was in there, and he actually had some of the props from some of his films.
Wow!
Just a way of background, I think Heston's legacy is a little bit blurred by people who want to be overtly political and just think of him as Mr. Gun,
NRA, right.
Mhm.
But what they fail to mention or forget about is that Charlton Heston not only was an Oscar-winning actor for Ben-Hur and was great in The Agony and the Ecstasy and all these big epics, but he was also a fine actor and one of the best American Shakespearean actors out there. He was actually a very good actor. But we actually asked him about his political involvement. And I thought it was interesting because he said, the biggest thing I can do for a politician is at the state or congressional or maybe Senate level. He said, if you're running for president, you don't need me to tag along because you should have the gravitas, you should have the money, you should have the resources to stand on your own and mount a campaign. He said, where I come in is at a congressional race, and I can come to Boise, Idaho, or Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or wherever, and get all the local media at the time to draw attention to a candidate that's running at a lower level of office. So that was what he talked about. And we asked him, does he think his right-wing politics, this was his second interview, has it impacted his ability to get work? And he said, I'm a well-known Hollywood conservative. It's been out there for years. He said, I get some cover because I was actually with MLK at the March on Washington with Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier and all these others. So he marched for civil rights back in the 1960s. So that gave him a little bit of cover himself when it came to his politics. But he said, I don't think it's hurt me in roles. He said, but I do actually think that younger actors trying to make it in this town have to keep their politics, if they're on the conservative side, quiet, which of course is unfortunate because we all decry what happened in the late 40s and 50s with the Hollywood blacklist.
Right.
And we'd be loath to believe that there is some kind of informal blacklist that is existing in our progressive society today due to someone's politics. But Heston sort of intimated that could be the case.
You know, the other thing he pointed out, which Mike has had some experience with, both personally and with his family, and that is that he talked about the fact that he was so lucky because the majority of actors don't act, he said. He said a painter can work at a gas station and then go home and paint, but an actor, if he doesn't have a part or a stage, can't. And it's true today too that what was it, maybe 1% of the actors in Hollywood are making a living acting. And he brought that up, and he tried to change that, when he was involved with the Screen Actors Guild, but it's a hard thing to do because of the number of people that want to be in the business.
And we asked him about his start in his career, and he goes, he was in The Greatest Show on Earth, was one of his first big films, and then a few years later, the last DeMille film was The Ten Commandments, and he said, if you can't make it in 2 DeMille films, you ain't gonna make it.
Right.
He said, if you can't make it, right.
Yeah, he said. But I again, when we talk about the versatility and how he sort of gets a bum rap, there's a film from 1958, I believe, called A Touch of Evil.
Yeah, it was a good movie.
And it's the last of the film noir. It's considered sort of the last film noir. It's an Orson Welles masterpiece. And yeah, it's a little goofy because he plays a Hispanic detective named Mike Vargas, and they put the tanning stuff on him. But it's with Marlene Dietrich, Orson Welles, Heston, Janet Leigh, Dennis Weaver. It's a remarkable, entertaining film. And Heston said to us, it's probably one of the best B films ever made. That's how he characterized it to us.
Right. Wow.
There was also an interesting story he told about Cecil B. DeMille, that on one of his pictures, depending on the time of the year, he would keep extra people employed so that they could have money over the holidays. I just thought,
the fall.
Yeah, that I thought was fascinating.
They would get overtime pay above their extras. They would get a bigger slice, a bigger check.
Yeah.
And he didn't take. He was a director to some extent, but he also didn't take the art of acting overtly serious as you think he would take it, because he said, as a director, the last thing you want to do is, as an actor, going to your director and like jacking off about, motivation and things like that, which he pointed to a director that he worked with, William Wyler, on Ben-Hur. And he said, the thing about Wyler, and it's legendary, Wyler would do 50 takes, and he did it without giving a real direction on what he wanted on take 2, take 10, take 30. He just knew that the more you did it, the less you were acting, and the more natural you would become.
Yeah.
And that was the Wyler style, and Heston had no problem with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. How did you get the second interview? Why did he remember you guys when you came back the second time 15 years later?
Yeah, we just kept in touch. And I think this actually came through his daughter, who sort of handled some of his PR appointments. I don't know if he had a formal publicist, but we had the extensive clip, the newspaper clip of our first interview. And when Tom and I resurrected our interviews in the early 90s, we went back to a handful of people that were kind enough to see us the first time around.
Yeah.
Wow. That is fascinating.
That genuineness of, it was a Midwestern thing. And he even kind of alluded to it. He said, boys, when you get married, find a Midwestern woman, he was just like my wife, he was very, very salt of the earth, down to earth. You could talk to him about anything. His knees were shot at that point. He was just, hobble-kneed. He looked like Joe Namath. When he was walking across the tennis court there, I didn't know how he could return serve with those knees. But he just,
politics be damned. I think I'm not the only one who's saying this. But, shame on Michael Moore for the despicable thing he did on that fake documentary he did. I think it was the Columbine one. And, going up to Heston's home and accosting the poor man when it was already publicly known that he was battling Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
That is below the belt and shameless. And, I don't know how people like that can sleep with themselves.
Yeah, the times have changed now, I think, also for the worse. But yeah, a guy like him that has such a varied background in terms of the things that he committed himself to, it's hard to pigeonhole him as, somebody who was crazy. And so a lot of people do. But, I don't know anybody in our generation that doesn't have a favorite, whether it's Planet of the Apes or Soylent Green or any of those, that
Right.
doesn't
Omega
have
Man.
Omega Man, who doesn't
Right.
have a Charlton Heston movie that they're like, oh my God, every time I see that on TV, I watch it.
Well,
Right?
he
I
also
mean-
said something kind of interesting about politics. This is the last time we'll hit this probably, but that he said that his politics never changed through the years, that it was really the party that changed, that he
Yeah.
didn't become conservative, he didn't become really more right-leaning. The party, which was more middle of the road, became more left of center. He never really changed. He didn't.
Yeah.
So, it was interesting to, hear him say that and to think
Yeah.
about,
Yeah. Well,
And I think
anyways, there's
moderates on both sides of the aisle right now are sort of saying the same thing about their respective parties.
exactly. Well,
Right.
there's Charlton Heston and 75 other great stories in this book, Hollywood Heyday. It's on Amazon. Go get it. It's fascinating stuff that you don't know. And we're going to be doing a lot more interviews with these guys to get the scoop on some of the other stars and celebrities from years past that you guys remember and enjoyed. So thanks, guys, for being with us, and we'll talk
Thank
to you
you.
soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.